The judicial officer determines whether you're guilty or not. If you're guilty, sentence is passed, and the stipulated punishment is meted on you. In some cases, it's just a fine. In some cases, it's jail term plus fine. All those things. Now, we get to a position where you're taken to jail. You're either taken to a male prison. If you're a woman, you're taken to the women's prison. If you're a child, you're taken to a juvenile facility, because that also happens, that we have those postal institutions as well, right? Now, in the case of women, what?
I'm shaking my head because we've had cases of juveniles actually being taken to the adult
To the adult jail.
Yes. But continue.
Okay.
Yes.
In the case of women, you'll find that a woman is actually going through this prosecution process when A, either she's expecting a baby, or B, she's nursing a small baby. Then she's taken to prison. She will go with that baby to prison. Now, who is in prison? Who's been imprisoned? It's the mother and the child. And what happens to the child? Now, even if the woman is not taken to prison with her child, maybe she was not having a young baby or does not have a child at all, how does society treat a woman who's actually been taken to prison and who comes out of prison? Do you treat them the same way? Do you look at, this is Ndu, she was in prison for 11 months, and this is Eric, he was also in prison for another 11 months. Are we looked at the same way?
The same way.
Are we not? And what is going through the minds of these two former prisoners? What support does the society give to the two former prisoners? There's an organization that is specifically looking at the welfare of former women, imprisoned women, and this is Clean Start and the Coalition of Formerly Imprisoned Women. Let's just look at the statistics first. Globally, 700,000 women plus are in prisons around the world. 60% of children of imprisoned mothers are below the age of 10 years. 39% of imprisoned mothers do not know the whereabouts of their children. 90% of imprisoned women in Kenya are single parents and breadwinners. 69% of imprisoned women in Kenya are aged between 20 and 39 years. So we are saying that a vast majority of the women in Kenyan prisons are below 40. We are saying that a vast majority of women in Kenyan prisons are single mothers, and they're the breadwinners for their families. So what is happening now to the families when the breadwinner has been jailed? What's happening? What kind of support are they receiving? All these are questions that have been raised, and that's where Teresa and Njoroge decided, you know what, let's have this conversation. Let's bring together people who can help have this conversation and support the women. And that's where the Clean Start organization, Clean Start Solutions started, and the Coalition of Formerly Imprisoned Women. Teresa joins us on the line because today they have an event and she'll be telling us about the event. Teresa, good morning.
Good morning, Eric, and
Welcome.
everyone else in the studio.
Welcome to the Situation Room. We are glad to have you on the show.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Let's start with the background to this. What made you decide to found this organization, Clean Start Solutions?
Eric, it was my own personal wrongful imprisonment, going through arrest, prosecution, and then being convicted to serve a whole year, accompanied by my then 3-month-old daughter. And it was purely because I refused to bribe the arresting officer, because he did ask me to pay upon arrest and also just when I was about to get into sentencing. And when I did not part with cash, I ended up getting that wrongful and malicious conviction.
So was it later determined that it was wrongful? So it was on appeal that you got out of jail?
I completed my 1-year sentence. The wheels of justice ran so slow. So by the time I was getting the vindication and clear run, I had already completed my sentence. and the Court of Appeal cleared me, and I got compensated partly by the government for that experience. But I think the experience of what I saw from arrest, through the corridors of justice and all the way to prison, of how women are handled with their children, and the genuine cry for justice in this country really left an indelible mark in me to do something towards bringing change for the impacted.
Teresa, let me ask you this question. You talk about compensation, really. Is that compensation, whatever it was, really enough? I mean, and if you're being compensated, what are you being compensated for? Is it for time loss? Is it for the wrongful jail term? What is it that you're being compensated for? And what is it that they base, because compensation usually is a certain amount of money. What do they base that amount on and then consider it to be adequate?
Well, unfortunately, that compensation, was not and will never be enough. And I say that because once you go through that system and the stigma that you get from imprisonment, your life is never the same again. They've altered your life. They've altered your children's lives. You're now, forever having this tag on you of a former inmate, and so the compensation is never enough. And, they try to base it on the time you've lost, the cruel and harsh treatment you go through in prison, your reputation, because that really marred. But it really never is enough.
Tell us about that experience. Once you got convicted and now you went to prison, just give us your time in prison, what you went through psychologically, emotionally, and especially now that you went to prison with a young baby.
It's really traumatic. It affects you socially, it affects you emotionally, physically, the environment that you're in. It just alters your DNA by the time you're done with that sentence. From health, the kind of food you're taking, the kind of language and culture in prison. It's not conducive for women, let alone the little children. And I say that because primarily we've inherited our prison systems from the British Protectorate when we got independence 58 years ago, and we've not invested in the infrastructure. There's nothing that has changed, and they were primarily built for men. So you can imagine coming into these structures as a woman, and you're in the thousands of you, plus your little children. It's very, very difficult.
Just let me understand this. So they are children. If you are in prison of a young child, you're saying is that there is a population of young children who are in prison with their mothers.
We call them not my crime, yet my sentence. Yes, there are children accompanying their mothers in prison, growing up behind bars.
So just explain, because I'm sure they are of varying ages. So what do these children do to occupy themselves on a daily basis? Is there a school within the prison? How are they managed?
It's very, very difficult for these little children, because remember, they are not part of they don't get a convict warrant. The convict warrant is what allows the prison officers to admit you into prison. A child does not get a convict warrant. So when a child, comes into prison, they are, quote unquote, an invisible person in prison. They're not in the system, so to speak. And they are 100% at the liberty of well-wishers. So people who will come to bring food, bring clothes, it's really not the responsibility of prison, so to speak, from budget and all that. However, the officer in charge of the women's prison go out of their way to see to it that these children get nutritious food, create partnerships with NGOs and faith-based organizations, individuals, well-wishers who would support in that journey. And then some few of the correctional institutions have schools nearby where the children go to. But really, what I would say is that it's not a system that's built to accommodate these children. And the effect on these children is lifelong. It's irreversible because the first few years in this world was in a world where they thought that's home, that's the world. And then when they come out into the normal world, it's, the shock. And it takes them so much time to adjust to the normal world. You can imagine the clothes that they see. It's the prison uniform. It's the clothes that the prisoners wear. And we all know the state of our prisons in Kenya. And I must say that what's really wrong is the fact that, as Eric was talking about the statistics, 90% of these women who are in prison are mothers and the sole breadwinners. Now, we take most of these women to prison because of petty offenses. These are women who are trying to make ends meet. It's not like she woke up and she decided to become a criminal on that day, or she has a criminal mind. She woke up, and because she didn't have any occupational opportunity, any economic activity to bring some food back home, so she went hawking or she went prostituting, name it, to bring food back home. Some brew changa, and that's how they end up in conflict with the law and end up being in prison, can't afford legal representation. And those who go with their children to prison actually consider themselves, at least I do know, where my children are. 39% of these women do not know where their children are as they serve their sentences, because she left home going to find a way to bring back some food, was arrested and never comes back. And these children now hit the streets left on their own because we don't have social structures to support these children.
Teresa, this is Ndu, and I'm looking at what you're doing with Clean Start. So then it would give the assumption that this kind of help or interventions come after some of these women then have left. But it would also appear that there's a lot of work that needs to be done even during the time of incarceration. Because I'm just thinking about it, and I'm saying even before you get out, there just seems that there's a lot that needs to be handled or taken care of, paid attention to by the state and other actors, to start to unfold and unpack all of this. What would you say are some of the attention areas? I mean, it's a mess. I mean, I'm gobsmacked because where would you even start? Somebody who is arrested by the city council, for example, for hawking, and then is in prison for a year and doesn't know where her family is. Surely there's got to be a better intervention on dealing with some of these things.
Indeed, Andu. While Clean Start really majorly focuses on bridging the gap between prison and community and ensuring we avoid that gaping trench in between, and we focus primarily there because there's no structure, there's absolutely nothing, and so most of the women would just get right into this deep trench, of stigma, isolation, pain and outrage, depression, to a point of committing suicide, because we have women with whom we serve sentences who literally did commit suicide post-imprisonment, and that's just because there's no reintegration or aftercare that's concerted to support the women. We do begin our interventions in prison, and so we've formed very radical collaborations, for example, with the Kenya Pediatric Association, various faith-based organizations, various individuals in what, in our intervention, what we call the circles of healing, This is where the women, get healing from the traumas that they experience, but also preparing them for life post-imprisonment. And the beauty of these interventions is that they are run by some of the formerly imprisoned women who work at Clean Start, who now go back into these institutions and say, hey, we know what you're going through. We've been through this road before. And this is the best you could use your time while you're here to prepare for life post-imprisonment. But I must say, there's a lot of, as you say, there's a lot of systemic reforms and improvements that need to be done. We need to close this tap that takes every other woman to prison just because she's poor. I could confidently say we have criminalized poverty in this country. We have, because a majority of those we take to prison are the poor. They're not in prison because they're criminals, but the poverty situation they were in has been criminalized. So there's quite a lot when you look at advocacy, policies, declassifying our petty offenses. If we say Muratina or brewing changa is illegal, Muratina is now being exported to the UK and very well packaged.
It's being sold in Europe, yes.
But right here, our women are being taken to prison who, we really need to declassify our petty offenses because, as I said, most of them we've inherited and don't suit our culture.
In addition to supporting those who are in prison and looking at the life outside prison, is Clean Start also looking at those who are going through the process? So say, just like you said, the single mother has come out of home, she's been arrested, she's been taken to prison. Not to prison, to court. She has pleaded not guilty and the case has been set for mention on a certain date. So she goes to remand. And as she's going through this process, she has no capacity to get a lawyer. Are you supporting them at that stage?
Yes, we do. Through collaboration with organizations such as Justice Defenders, whose main mandate is around access to justice. With other partners, for example, the Legal Resource Foundation, who also offer paralegals, Amnesty International, and many others who would come in to help the women through their legal cases. And I must say, Eric, it's very painful because even at that time, at that point, unfortunately, it's still too late because mom has already left her children all by themselves back at home. But yes, we are ideally the best case scenario, which we are looking into, would be, prevention. But prevention, unfortunately, will only happen once we've re-looked into our policies and into our laws. And also a lot of sensitization to magistrates needs to happen. So the judicial training institution, the judiciary as a whole, really needs to be sensitive towards women and the kind of women that we take to prison.
I agree. I mean, these are long-term conversations or medium to long-term conversations in terms of changing policy and laws and all. But at that point, when you hear of a case of a woman who's been arrested, who's been taken to court, who's been taken to remand prison, and you know from your own experience, from the statistics that you have, it's highly likely that this woman left other children at home and they have no support. How do you come in as Clean Start? Do you now go back and say, where were you? Where are your children? And then you start supporting the children as you're also helping their mother in the court process?
Indeed. As I sit right here, there's a woman in Kajiado. She's serving a year at Langata Women Maximum Prison. She's in there because of selling scrap metal. She's left 4 of her children back in Kajiado all by themselves. And so we've got to work with the community. We've got to work with the chief. We've got to work with neighbors, friends, to take care of these children. And that's just one case. Just recently, there was another woman who had been imprisoned because she couldn't pay a fine of 100,000 shillings. She had gotten into a fight with a fellow woman in Kibera and left her 2 children all by themselves at Mukuru. So we've got to go on the ground, meet the children after this woman tells us where her children are, work with the neighbors, work with the chiefs, work with friends to provide for the children, but also try and get care for these children, because most of these children are then prone to other issues, and that's why I say the judiciary needs to be sensitive. When you're sentencing a woman, it doesn't, cost so much asking this woman, are you a mother? Where are your children? And so that the state could come in and support the children, because these are just a few cases here and there that we know of. How about the thousands that we don't on a daily basis?
But Teresa, if I may interject slightly, I mean, the cases you mentioned, socially one understands, because many of these people fall in the category of what you would call petty criminals. But there are women in prison who are not petty criminals.
Yeah.
They have been accused for, well, the sort of crimes that we normally associate with men. And I'm certain some of these women also have children. Now, the question I want to ask is, are there organizations in this country, or does your organization help with the legal requirements, the legal redress that is required in such cases? Because again, from what you've said, I've understood you to say that many of these women end up in prison because they don't have legal representation.
Yeah.
The legal representation is themselves, and it's inadequate. So, is there a body? I know of organizations that are led by women like FIDA. There are others who are supposed to take care of such groups. But how many exist? How effective are they? Because if I'm looking at just anecdotally the numbers you're speaking of, clearly the efforts are inadequate.
Yeah, indeed. And yes, there are women who in prison who you would, say indeed. When I look at your case and situation, indeed, it makes sense. Law and law stipulates that you're a danger to society, or you need to be imprisoned to pay your debt for what you've done. There are those. The problem comes in that there are very few of those. If you compare to those who have been taken in due to poverty-related issues or the wrong classification of the offenses. There are a number of organizations that provide legal representation, but I would still say that still not enough, and I'd call on LSK, for example, or lawyers in this country. We really need to provide. It's stipulated within. It's their mandate to provide a number of hours pro bono, because again, a lot of these women can't afford to pay the kind of lawyers' fees that are required. So I think we need to look at it seriously. Everyone needs to be on the table. All hands should be on deck. Lawyers should come together and see how are we providing pro bono services that's required to these women for the sake of the families that are broken.
It continues. In the room with you this and every weekday morning is Eric Latif, Ndu Oko, and C.T. Muga. Joining us on the line this morning is Teresa Njoroge. She is the founder and CEO of Clean Start Solutions. We are talking about life for prison for women in and after prison. And Teresa has told us from her own personal experience to others that she has seen, the women that she has seen who've been taken to prison, who have gone through prison sentences. Many of them are single parents. They come out, they go to prison, their children are left out. They don't know what is happening to their children. Up to 65% of those in prison, they actually don't know what's happening to their children. And a majority of them are single mothers. I want to ask the question about the experience, especially of the young children as their mothers are in prison and the children are in prison with them. Just from that point, you go to prison with a 3-month-old baby. You're therefore at that point still breastfeeding. At this point, you are at a point where you need a lot of support in diapers, in clothes, in feeding bottles, in the kind of nutrition, even as you get to the ages of weaning and all. What kind of support does the prison system offer this mother at that point?
The beauty is that the prison service has embraced what we call the open door policy. And so in partnership with other organizations, then they are able to attend to the needs of these children. Health-wise, nutrition, play, and also when it comes to improving the environment. They work in collaboration with partners to ensure that the child needs are met. And this really helps. And that's how, through the open door policy, an organization like Clean Start, for example, is able to partner with Kenya Pediatric Association and provide the needed facilities or services to the pregnant women or the little children, the infants. There are quite a number of other organizations who have embraced the open door policy and, in collaboration with Kenya Prison Service, going to the prisons and provide, whatever is required and whatever is needed for these children. But at the end of the day, that environment is not conducive for that child. And we know that the first 1,000 days of a child in this world form the foundation upon which everything else will be built in the life of this child. So you can imagine it's lifelong trauma. Even though the children are resilient, they've shown resilience, and we're trying to do research to have data that proves and shows the impact that this environment has on children. And even though they try to be resilient, you can tell, because we interact with these children post imprisonment. They are shy. They'll forever be reading something, unsocial like any other children. You can tell the difference. Never happy. Because we interact with these children through their mothers, we meet them, and we can see the impact that the imprisonment has had on their children.
Teresa, I mean, there's so much to handle, even as you're giving this, and also from what you went through. And there's so much to deal with, whether you're looking at nutrition of these children, whether you're looking at, the social aspect of their lives, and then their mothers and what's going to happen thereafter. But it would seem to me that still there's a huge responsibility on the shoulders of the justice system. Now, I don't even want to start to ask, have you been able to look at that? Or has anybody really been able to look at that? Because it also appears that officers of this system are really busy with the business of, trying a case, deciding on a case, sentencing and moving on. They're not really considering these things, which only become a reality after sentence has been given and that life begins. Only then are you then alive to the realities of that situation. Before that, you're kind of doing your job, right? Getting through it. Is there some kind of sensitivity now, with all of this coming out into the open, of the judicial officers to actually realize what happens in the life of somebody who has been sentenced for petty crime? To say that perhaps there is a different kind of sentencing that can be given, or a different kind of punishment, other things taken into consideration, because it seems to me that that's the root of the problem.
Indeed, and they have options. They could give non-custodial sentences. They could, embrace alternative dispute resolution mechanisms all these options are there. And it's very well stated that the last resort, the last option is custodial sentencing. Yet they always go for the custodial sentencing.
Because it's easier, or why?
Yeah, faster. You also seem to be doing your job or whatever it is. The truth of the matter is that we've got women in their thousands, children in their thousands who've been through the criminal justice system and have been processed just as a number, However, in the last couple of years, 2-3 years or so, we've seen some improvement. When Maraga introduced the small courts, that are able to determine some of these cases and refer them to alternative dispute resolution and non-custodial sentencing. COVID-19, unfortunately, has been a blessing in disguise because prisons have to be decongested, so it's come up as a blessing in that a lot of these women who have, 2-3 month sentences, 4 months, they've been released and they're now not, they do not have the luxury of taking everyone to prison now due to the COVID-19 situation. So, and our sincere hope is that even once we are able to deal and handle with the COVID-19 pandemic, that we don't go back to business as usual, but I agree. There's a lot of work to be done within the judicial setup. There's a lot that can be prevented at that point. If the prosecutors bring a case that's not watertight, you don't have to keep waiting for them to collect evidence for the case to go on. There's a lot that can happen from the point of arrest to the point of, this case going to the judicial officers. There's a lot that can be done at that level to prevent and stop this. But we see how, our arresting officers, we see how they treat, especially our vulnerable, the marginalized. And it's not the same treatment that people with means, and this is very unfortunate. If you are rich and guilty in this country, unfortunately, you can get your way around. But if you're poor and innocent, who unto you? These are realities we see in this country, which is very unfortunate.
The kind of support that you offer, Teresa, you've talked a lot about this psychosocial support for the women when they're in prison, when they come out of prison. How about economically? Somebody has been there for a year and they're coming out, and what took them there, like you're saying, in many cases, is they were trying to eke out a living. So how do you support them to restart their life?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, no matter how much you invest in this woman, their mindset, their attitudes, being in the right place, at the end of the day, they've got to provide for their children. And so Clean Start has taken it upon ourselves through 6 collaborations, through funding opportunities and collaborations with, for instance, the Women Enterprise Fund and so on and so forth, to be able to provide economic opportunities for these women. And for each woman who's been through our program, we offer a startup kitty of about 15,000 Kenya shillings. And in addition to the cash, there's a lot of training, there's a lot of mentorship, there's a lot of support, and continued injection into that business, holding hands of these women to see to it that this income generating activity works, and that she never gets back to that cycle of, I can't pay my rent, I can't provide food. Woe unto us if one of our kids gets sick because of the way times are like, and it just starts with, I can't pay my rent of 2,000, 3,000 bob. I couldn't get that together. I just couldn't be able to, bring some food home. And she gets overwhelmed. She's a single breadwinner for this family. and we're not looking at monthly expenses of more than 5,000 to 6,000. You know, it's round about that per month, rent, food. You know, and when she can't just meet the costs for bills for 1 month, second month, by the third month, she's desperate and in the street, can't take her kids to school, and so on and so forth, and it spirals.
You make a very strong case for this individual, I think, who represents very many women who find themselves in dire straits. I could also argue that there are many women who find themselves in dire straits but do not involve themselves in activities that go against the law. But that's not really what I want to ask. I know that at the coast, there is a mission called Lydia Kituri's mission. Now, Lydia Kituri's mission helps women in prison. But they don't stop there. They provide health and child support, but they also help build churches and creches. Creche is the word for children. Now, do you know of any such organization, say within Nairobi, or organizations who actually take, you said well-wishers, who take very specific care in ensuring that they provide these sort of services which clearly are needed and which clearly the prison service doesn't provide?
Yes, there are quite a number of them. There is Nafisika Trust, there is Faraja Foundation, there is Crancy Power that creates a lot of awareness, for the men and youth. And for them, they do a lot of prevention for, the men and the youth getting into the correctional facilities. But when it comes to the economic empowerment, the bringing together of the women, then Clean Start takes the lead in that, because we really felt there was a gap, specifically for the women and children, and when it comes to matters reintegration back into society. And that's when now we came up with a coalition of formerly imprisoned women to bring them, all together, where they can learn, be empowered, and, look into housing, look into health, look into economic opportunities, education of their children, and even some of these women going back to school themselves. And the reason why we make such a strong case, it's because we know these women. We've lived with these women. We know them in and out, and we know how they were pushed to the edge to be hawking wherever it is they were hawking. And for those who have not gotten into prison but are in the same kind of situation, it's just a matter of when, if we don't put in the necessary mechanism for them to have a decent means of livelihood.
Teresa, tell us about this event that you'll be holding today, the Beyond the Bars conference. What's it all about?
So it's one of our signature events, Beyond the Bars. Currently, what happens on a day-to-day basis is that we've got the women in different counties. So, in Nyeri, in Machakos, in Murang'a, wherever it is they are. And we've got women coming, who've already arrived from as far as Isiolo, Nanyuki, Nandi, Busia. So Beyond the Bars brings the women together and bring all these chapters together, where, they now meet, yes, under Clean Start, but as members of the coalition of formerly imprisoned women, which is the only coalition of formerly imprisoned women in Kenya, and I think in Africa. So when we come together, we not only bring the women together, but we bring other key stakeholders, because we're trying to create awareness of the issues that these women had to go through in prison, but also the challenges of reintegration. So we have the faith-based organizations coming in today. We have the corporate sector represented today. We've invited some of the magistrates to attend, and other key players, individuals, business leaders, to just come and meet and listen to their stories. A number of media people will also be present to tell their stories, because we really want people to understand it wasn't out of wish or, I didn't make the decision that day when I got arrested. It was really trying to make ends meet. But while we create that awareness as well, the big question is, we're now out here. Stigma is so rife. We've got women who've committed suicide because I couldn't get a certificate of good conduct. I wasn't accepted back into my family. My village, they do not want to see me.
Yeah.
I cannot even dare say I'm a formerly imprisoned woman. So how do we bring down this mountain of stigma?
And you'll have a big name as well, headlining the event.
Headlining the event, indeed. Felicity Huffman is here all the way from California to support and cheer on the women. She has her own story, very different circumstances from the circumstances our women have been through, but it will be such an incredible opportunity for our women to meet and hear Felicity's story, and for her to also learn from the stories of our women. And we're very grateful.
Just to jog people's memory, is Felicity Huffman is the Desperate Housewives and star, and she has also acted in very many other shows as well. She was incarcerated herself for a couple of days over a scandal involving, what was it? It's about payment of university admission. So she'll be coming to share her own story, and maybe this is also part of the community service that she's required to fulfill.
Indeed, and I must say, if someone has paid their debt to society, of course we're championing for those who did not even deserve to be there in the first place. But if someone has been through the system, they've paid their debt, for how long will they keep paying for imprisonment? We all deserve second chances.
There's a question that has been asked, and this is when you told us that after your prison sentence and you came out, you pursued justice and you got justice and you even got some compensation. So in what form was this compensation that you got from the government? Was it money? Was it and how much, and how did it come? How was it paid out to you?
It was cash. The compensation was in form of cash. However, as soon as the courts declared that I needed to be compensated and vindicated and cleared of any wrongdoing, unfortunately, there's still other parties who are involved in my prosecution who have still not compensated. So I cannot, I'm not at liberty to talk about amounts because it's something that's still ongoing. But yeah, it feels great, to eventually get vindicated.
I guess the question is, Teresa, have you received the compensation that was ordered by the courts?
Yeah, I have received the government's portion.
Okay, and then the other parties haven't.
Okay.
And the other parties haven't, yeah. But I have received full compensation from the government in form of cash.
You see, why we ask is because we know that there are many people who found themselves in your position and whom the very courts that you went to found to have been innocent and were owed compensation and have not been paid compensation. And some of these amounts, well, it goes into the billions and it spans over many, many, many years. It's against its background. So one could argue that if we were to look at your case, you could say the government does pay sometimes.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Teresa, we want to thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for all the good work that you're doing in highlighting these issues. Obviously, you need a lot of support also to look at overhauling the whole system to make it more friendly, especially, and I look at this from the innocent children who end up getting caught up in this web. And also the very many other innocent people who end up, not just women, but even men who end up in a system. You're innocent from the beginning, but you will go to jail and you will stay in jail. As you're seeking your justice, you are serving a prison sentence. And now trying to clear your name and get back into society becomes a big problem. And these are very many who are out there and they deserve a hearing as well. Thank you very much, Felicity. Teresa. Did they call you Felicity? Thank you very much, Teresa Njoroge. She is the founder and CEO of Clean Start Solutions. They have some good work that they are doing beyond the bars conference taking place today, but also the coalition of formerly imprisoned women that comes together to see how to support women who are in prison, who've been imprisoned, who are coming out back into society, and they require all the support. Maybe you can just tell people your website and how they can get more information about your organization.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much for having us and amplifying what we're, trying to do. Anyone could get in touch with us. Our website is cleanstartkenya.org, cleanstartkenya.org. We're also on social media at Clean Start Kenya on all platforms, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, Clean Start Kenya. We are in Westland, School Lane, number 31 is where the conference will be at. You're most welcome.
Asante sana. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your